Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our Nancy Drew Game ranking series, where we are reviewing every single Nancy Drew game on 6 stats, being the story and premise, the suspects, the puzzles, the music, the atmosphere, and the ending of each game. I'm your host, Jameson.
And I'm Julian. What's up, everyone?
And today we are reviewing Nancy Drew number 7, The Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake. We have a personal tie to it. This was the second game that we ever played, and the first one that we ever beat. And granted, we probably did use a lot of spoilers.
That must have been about 9 or 10 years ago.
The game did come out in around 2001, 2002, something like that.
All these games that we've reviewed thus far, they have a lot of age on them. And, it shows in the graphics, but that's, I think, honestly, part of the reason why we still love them.
This game, I gotta say, the community, I feel like it's really favorable in the community solely for the reason of nostalgia. And people who don't have a nostalgic tie to this game are usually the ones that have a lot of beef with it and don't necessarily like it much.
I've come across a lot of mixed opinions on the game, actually. I know
famous Nancy Drew YouTuber Arglefumph.
Yeah, Arglefumph, I'm sure a lot of people know of him. He is outspoken about not liking the game as much, and I respect his opinion. But
Michael, why would you do this to us?
No, it's definitely one of my favorite games. I'd say that, but I say we jump into the story and premise, because it's definitely got one of the strongest stories out of all Nancy Drew games, I think.
Right, so I'll take that off. The story begins with Nancy reading out a letter that she's writing to Bess and George about how she's gotten a phone call from an old friend of theirs, Sally McDonald, who's a photographer that recently bought a cabin by the side of a lake in Moon Lake, Pennsylvania. And it's this little wooded cabin. It's off the side of a lake that's shaped like a crescent moon, very remote. This is actually one of the few games with less than 4 suspects, and it's the first game to only have 3. And there is some speculation as to if they only had 3 suspects, because they may have been having some budgeting issues at Her Interactive at the time and couldn't afford a 4th voice actor or character model.
But in my opinion, this is the perfect game for the lower spectrum of suspects. I think 3 suspects works perfect. And you could toss up for debate about whether Tucker Davis or somebody was actually meant to be a suspect or something, but
right.
Given the atmosphere of Moon Lake, I think 3 suspects was actually perfect.
I feel like they could have probably gotten away with one more, but honestly, that's not something I'd complain about with this game. I'm trying to be fair because I love this game so much. So anyhow, Sally insists that she needs Nancy's detective skills immediately, and that something terrible happens here at night, and that she needs her help. And of course, Sally is very vague about everything. So Nancy pulls up to the cabin, and immediately an old dead maple tree falls behind her in her driveway, blocking her in. So now Nancy can't leave, because if she did, she'd have to go on foot, and it's way too far of a walk to the nearest town for her to be able to get out that way. And then when she gets to the house, she realizes that Sally's gone, and that there's no trace of her, there's no car, no tracks or anything, just a note that she left behind on the kitchen counter saying that she's driving to Philadelphia to live with her aunt for a few days, that Nancy should just leave and come join her in Philadelphia if she doesn't plan for somewhere to stay, and to give her a call on her cell phone as soon as she can.
Now, this is a perfect setup. It just throws you straight into the game. You're immediately immersed, and it's kind of a sense of urgency, a sense of fear that what drove Sally to get the heck out of Dodge immediately, to just leave Nancy on her own, and now she's trapped here. So it throws the player into the game immediately.
I think I can confidently call the opening to this game my favorite opening to any Nancy Drew game that follows the letter reading formula, partially because the music that they choose is just so perfectly dreadful. It's all plucked strings and everything, and it ends with this just really intense line of Nancy saying, "So here I sit, waiting for the phone to ring, a little creeped out about what might be driving Sally away and what I might be in for by staying here over the night." Because it's at that moment that you realize that Nancy's writing this letter just as something's about to go down.
Mm-hmm. And then not long after the opening letter ends, I'd say 5 or 10 minutes into the game, we get the first and sadly only real ghost dog encounter in which they attack the house that Nancy's in. And it's actually a pretty chilling cinematic. I liked it.
So, for starters, the game starts you off in the cabin right after you write the letter, and you can look around, you can check all the cabinets, find stuff like bottled water, flashlights, gloves, a map of the woods that's nearby, just all sorts of stuff that you'll be needing later on if it's a first-time playthrough. And then the phone will begin to ring within a minute of you exploring.
Right.
You pick it up, and it's Sally. She's talking to you from her car. She's getting a horrible connection. And before she breaks up, she warns you about the dogs. The dogs are going to attack the house, and this is when she starts to go through a tunnel or something, and she really starts to break up, and you can hardly make out what she's saying. And right after this, Nancy puts down the phone and starts hearing some strange noises. Do you want to talk about the strange noises?
The strange noises, they're really obvious fake. They're kind of like...
Ooh.
Yeah, they're just very knockoff spooky noises that obviously sound human. Nancy goes outside to investigate after hearing these noises, and she is introduced to the first suspect of the game, the bird watcher of Moon Lake, Red Knot.
So Red Knot is a bird watcher, and the strange noises that you heard was him trying to do a bird call for a cerulean warbler, which he thinks he heard in the area. He's all out on his own. He has an observation deck, maybe 50 yards away from the house, up a tree. And he just makes conversation with you for a little while in a hushed voice, trying not to scare away any of the birds. And he starts to tell you that the Malone house is not a good place for one young woman to be living, let alone two, thinking that you're now living there with Sally. And he tells you the legend of Mickey Malone and the ghost dogs of Moon Lake. And legend has it in the 1920s, a big hotshot prohibition gangster who's essentially like Al Capone, Mickey Malone, had a speakeasy made at his estate on the lake. He had the cabin built that Sally lives in, and he would just throw wild prohibition-age parties back when alcohol was illegal. Anyhow, once Mickey Malone was arrested, all four of his dogs went running off into the woods until they all finally died, says the legend. But every time someone comes back to try living in the Malone house, they come back too, and they attack the house and bark and snarl and keep everyone from sleeping and try to attack the people living there until they move out.
It's important to note that once Red Knot brings up Mickey Malone's existence and the history behind the ghost dogs, the game transitions from more of a storyline from finding out what the mystery is behind the ghost dogs to kinda uncovering Mickey Malone's lost gold and treasure.
Right, because Mickey Malone was famous for being the alleged man behind the hole-in-the-floor train heist, where, quite simply, two men hid inside of a cargo container on a train full of gold, cut a hole in the floor, and then just dropped out like 400 pounds of gold through the hole in the floor onto the railroad tracks.
I didn't know that was the backstory.
Yeah, Bess and George talk about it. This game had some fun Bess and George calls on the phone. So, towards the end of your conversation with Red Knot, the dogs you start to hear howling in the distance. And in a hushed voice, Nancy just goes to Red, "Are those the ghost dogs?" And he just goes, "Yup, they are. And I think it's your best idea that you get yourself back inside that house and lock the doors." And that's just what you do. And the spooky music starts to play, and it's about 10 seconds before a loud thud knocks at the door. You start hearing snarling, and there's a cinematic that plays where Nancy looks out the window, and she sees two dogs run by, and they both have glowing eyes, and one even comes right up to the window and starts barking at her. The Rottweilers.
Now, this was a really cool sequence of events. The dogs actually attacking the house. You get to see one up close and personal. But sadly, this is the only occurrence in which Nancy actually interacts with the ghost dogs, other than the end game, in which their true natures are revealed.
Yeah.
But I really would have appreciated if the dogs came around the house more often. I think that would have added a lot to the game.
Yeah, I remember the first time I played this, I was so scared to go into the woods the next morning, and
Oh
I
my
thought that
gosh,
you couldn't go in the woods at night, or it was like in danger of a game over sequence, and that you get attacked by the ghost dogs, but it didn't turn out like that. The next morning, you try to fix Sally's motorboat, and you get a spark plug from Red Knot in his tree house, and you take it to go to the two other locations across the lake, the Ranger Station and M's Emporium. These are the places where the two other suspects in the game are, Emily Griffin and Ranger Joe Akers. Or Jeff Akers.
Jeff Akers.
Jeff Akers. Joe Akers was his father. Julian, you want to take him away? You can take
Sure.
him because I talked for a while.
So, another task that Sally asks you to do is to check out the well water. And in order to do that, Nancy needs to get a brief little sample and then take it to Jeff Akers. This is done typically in the first occurrence of meeting Jeff, so Nancy will typically take the well water sample and meet Jeff Akers over at the Ranger Station, which is right across from Moon Lake. Jeff Akers is... What's a word you would use to describe Jeff Akers? He's a stickler.
He tries to be professional.
He would be the kid to remind the teacher of homework if
he's
the
almost
teacher forgot.
insecure because he really wants to be he wants to be transferred to some place where he actually gets to see action as a park ranger.
Right.
Because nobody ever goes to Moon Lake, especially off-season.
Yeah.
So there's never anything for him to do. There's no policing. He doesn't have anyone to, like, give tickets for illegal parking or fishing without a license. He has absolutely nothing to do all day, and he is a control freak who wants people to boss around.
He's very eager to enforce the laws, but nobody quite breaks the laws. And there's a little bit of a feud between him and Emily Griffin, the third and final suspect of the game. He theorizes that Emily is dragging Moon Lake to retrieve artifacts that don't rightfully belong to her. And that's a little bit of a subplot. There's a feud between the two suspects there. But Jeff Akers, he's a stickler. He comes off as polite. I wouldn't call him rude or mean. He assigns a lot of chores, but he's also there to help serve the people, as he always says. He's the one who ultimately returns the well water to you, and it tests back and positive for arsenic, meaning that the well, the main source of water for Nancy, has been poisoned. An interesting historical tie to Jeff Akers' character is that his grandfather, William Akers, was also in cahoots with Mickey Malone in the gold heists back in the 1920s.
William Akers was Mickey's right-hand man, actually, and he was the only one of his men who, to quote a character you meet later in the game, didn't treat him like dirt. Mickey was actually friends with Jeff's grandfather.
That gives Jeff Akers a unique kind of motivation to want to try to find the gold, and thus maybe use the ghost dogs to scare people off the Moon Lake property.
But at every single turn, Jeff just disowns his grandfather as hard as he can. He sometimes just doesn't want to talk about him, and he says
I think he's ashamed.
He's ashamed that he wants nothing to do with a gang of two-bit thugs, and for a while he denies him having any association at all with the Malone gangster story.
I think we should move on to Emily Griffin now, the last suspect of the game, owner of M's Emporium across from Jeff Akers' ranger station.
Emily has a surprisingly southern drawl for living in Pennsylvania, but I guess that the Midwest and the South can kind of blend like that sometimes. She is, how would you describe her? Kind of campy.
She's friendly. Here, I'll get into spoilers again. This game, like many others in the original, there's a flaw in which the friendly suspect is always the culprit.
And that is Emily in this game. Emily is just a southern lady. She always just...
I mean, she's a nice suspect. Her motivations is that, well, she's kind of like a treasure hunter. We hear about her scandals of potentially dragging the lake for artifacts and everything around Moon Lake, so it makes sense for her to want to chase after the gold.
The whole story about that is that when people were on their way to the speakeasy at Moon Lake, which was an underground bar where people would be served illegal alcohol during the Prohibition,
right.
If the feds turned up in search of people to bust for it, they'd just have to tip over the boats and literally everything in them would sink to the bottom of the river. So there's a lot of almost a century old of artifacts that are just at the bottom of the river that would be worth a lot of money if you were able to find them. And it's legal to pick up anything that naturally washes up on the shores of Moon Lake, but it's illegal to drag the lake bed for artifacts.
And that's what Jeff Akers accuses Emily Griffin of doing.
Then again, he's just so bored of doing nothing all day that he's probably just making it up.
Right. Alright, I think that encapsulates the three suspects pretty well.
And we'll cover the rest of the story as we go, as it becomes relevant to puzzles. So moving into puzzles now, what's a blanket statement you could say about the puzzles in this game?
Oh, I love the puzzles in this game, specifically as you progress through the game, how each puzzle, it kind of pertains to Mickey Malone's 4 dogs. I thought that was a really cool touch, how the dogs come back and have a lot of prevalence with each puzzle.
I would honestly say that of all the games we've reviewed so far, this one has the best puzzles.
I would say that too, definitely.
There's some that are really challenging. I feel like they're kind of spaced out in terms of challenging.
Let's start with the sandpaper dog statuette puzzles.
Yeah. So there's 4 little figurines in a cabinet in the cabin where you can twist them all, and they're all named after each of the 4 ghost dogs: Iggy, Lucy, Vetus, and Xander. And the whole deal with them is that you can twist them and change their directions, but one of them is stuck and you need sandpaper to get it moving again. And you get that by doing chores for Red Knot, because he bought out M's entire supply of sandpaper and just all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of doing people's chores in this game to get favors done for them.
There's 2 major instances of doing people's chores, and that's taking 6 pictures of birds around the place for Red Knot, but in order to do that, you need camouflage, and in order to get the camouflage from Emily Griffin, you need to collect a dozen little critters, and it goes on, and it's very tedious, all to get this sandpaper.
Oh man. So
But back to the original puzzle.
the dozen little. I just want to say real quick. The dozen little critters challenge could have had perfect potential for another Ghost Dog cinematic in the woods, where like.
It was unused potential, the Ghost Dogs.
Because with the dozen little critters challenge, you mandatorily have to go out at night to get the last 5 critters
That are in the woods, yeah.
Literally, the entire game, the objective is you walk to the woods, which is essentially a maze in this game, and you have to just flip over rocks and turn over branches and tree logs to try to just find worms, beetles, roaches, stuff like that. And you have to go out at night to find some of them. And maybe after you find the last one, a scripted event could play. There's just a way you could have improved the game. But again, seeing as they could only afford, I guess, 3 characters, they probably couldn't afford much more cinematic either.
Yeah, that's a shame. That's, in my opinion, the game's big flaw was underused Ghost Dog cinematics. But jumping back to the secret passage puzzle in the cabin.
Right. It's a really complicated puzzle, and I got to admit,
It has to do with the wallpapers and the clocks in the poem. There's so many factors.
I'm still so bad at doing it. The way that I get it done most of the time is I figure out what like the first 2 should be, and then I just fiddle around with the others until I get it right. So basically, there is a poem that's engraved on the wall of the cabin that explains how
It correlates each dog to a specific season.
yeah.
And then once you get the seasons down, you need to figure out which season correlates to the animal's wallpaper in the cabin.
Yeah, there's different kinds of wallpaper in the cabin. There's one with swans, there's one with deer, there's one with birds, I think, something like that. One just with a big apple tree.
So, with all these factors in mind, dogs correlating to seasons, seasons correlating to wallpapers, you need to move the dog statues so that they are facing the correct way of the wallpaper in the cabin. And I think that's a really cool idea for a puzzle, though there's a lot of... It's really confusing to draw the connections between dogs to seasons to wallpapers. I think that could have been explained more.
Pretty much the only way to get hints in this game is through calling Bess and George, which I guess gives them more use than usual in the Nancy Drew game. But there was no task list in this game, which is kind of a downgrade from Scarlet Hand, where at least you had one that was kind of like written out. Or does Nancy have her pager in this game? I think she does, with like the observations and stuff.
Yeah, there are observations.
There
but I don't
might
think
actually be a task list on that.
I don't think there's a definitive task list.
Well, if there is, the game does a very poor job of redirecting the player to realize they can use it.
Other puzzles that are notable in this game, other than the one mentioned... Other notable puzzles in this game, one that instantly jumps to mind is the very annoying Roman numeral puzzle that Jeff Akers assigns Nancy to do.
Oh, that's not so bad if you understand Roman numerals.
It always takes a moment to catch on. It's just time consuming, and it kind of feels out of place for the game, but you know what? It's educational in the sense that you learn about Roman numerals, so that's cool. One last puzzle that I really liked was the Baldo Matthias puzzle turning into Waldo Matthias, or is it vice versa? No.
It was Waldo turning into Baldo.
Oh,
was
that's
the name.
right.
Explain who Waldo is.
Waldo Matthias was the FBI agent who ultimately put Mickey Malone behind bars. And was he actually buried there? No, that's a false tomb. What am I saying?
Yeah, he put that gravestone there before he was even captured as like a joke, because that was the entrance to his speakeasy.
Something we need to clarify is that there's a woods directly next to Sally McDonald's cabin, and deep through the woods there's a cemetery where Mickey Malone is allegedly buried along with his 4 dogs. And there's a couple other miscellaneous graves there, one of them being Waldo Matthias.
The other ones are all puns. This says stuff like, "Marbles, we are so sorry to have lost you."
Yeah, there's a couple like that are funny. But the puzzle that comes to mind for me is you need to get a key. I'm forgetting how you get the key.
Oh,
Okay,
you get the key from Vivian Whitmore. Okay, so once you finally get into the basement, you find a portrait on the wall that shows Mickey and his girlfriend, Vivian Whitmore, outside of the cabin in like the year 1924 or something. And you can show this painting to Jeff Akers, who's got the historical archives of Moon Lake with him, and he identifies her as Vivian Burnett. And she turns out that these days she goes by Vivian Whitmore, and she's able to get you her phone number. And Vivian's in like her 80s, and she's kind of fun to talk to. She's a colorful character. She's got a lot of spark for an 80-year-old woman. And
I appreciate her as a phone contact.
yeah, she's a fun person to talk to. And so Vivian makes a deal with you that if you give her the old portrait of her and Mickey, then she'll send you the key that you'd use to get into the speakeasy. She still has it at the bottom of her jewelry drawer, and she could never part with it. And she says that she's willing to make a deal if you give her the painting or the portrait. And so that's what happens, and you use the key to unlock the puzzle on the tombstone. You get into the speakeasy, and it's a bunch of dirt tunnels, and you have to navigate them with a flashlight, which you get from M's Emporium. But once you actually get into the speakeasy, everything in there is just so much cooler. It's almost... We'll get to that when we get to Atmosphere. It's a very cool place. Otherwise...
Any other notable puzzles?
There's some endgame puzzles that are really cool.
I like the Spigots puzzle that's in the speakeasy.
Yeah. The speakeasy...
That's a cool one. You have to analyze each of the dog's collars and their individual paintings, and then each spigot, which, if you don't know what a spigot is, it's just what you...
It's a soda tap.
Yeah, it's like a soda tap. Each spigot is a particular color, and you need to pull down the spigots in a certain order so that the first initial of the dog appears on that spigot. Once you do that, the third secret passageway of this game opens?
Yeah, something like that.
That was a clever puzzle.
The two most concurrent themes in all puzzles in this game are Roman numerals and Mickey's dogs. If you're well versed in both of those, then you should be able to play through this game and have a good time. But otherwise, I think we'll get to the rest of the puzzles in the end game because they're not relevant until then.
Music.
So now we move on to music. This is an exceptional game for music.
The daytime music is way different than the nighttime music. It was a really cool touch.
And that's a really, really good distinction to make. Daytime, it's just a happy flute, it's like a bird whistling, and there's a harp that's in the background of some parts of it. And the nighttime is just more like less of harp chords, but more just like single strings being plucked.
This is an old memory from when I was first playing the game many years ago. I would get so scared that I would intentionally go inside the cabin and change it to daytime so I could listen to the cheerful music. Because I wouldn't be scared anymore when I would listen to that flute music. It was so pretty.
Yeah, again, I just wish there was a reason to be scared at night if you were playing the game for a second time, because they should have made some sort of mechanic where if you wander out too long, then the ghost dogs will come get you or something. We didn't talk about the Red Hawk Challenge. I just realized that with the whole...
Yeah.
We'll get into that with the ending. We'll start with that when we work our way to the end.
Okay, that's good. Another notable theme, my personal favorite, is the speakeasy.
The speakeasy theme is just the most chill, jazzy piece of music in this game.
It fits so well with the secret passageways.
It doesn't just play in the speakeasy. Sometimes it'll play as like the casual lantern-lit night theme. Sometimes you'll hear it sometimes when you start the game up and Nancy's exploring before she gets the phone call from Sally. It's just got such a nice bass to it, and I'll play like a full 15 seconds of it. I love this song so much.
Yeah, it's a great one.
And
all in all, the music, the three big distinctions between, I would say, daytime, nighttime, and the speakeasy, which kind of deserves its own little theme, they're very well done. All three very unique. They all have their place, and there's not much other to say than I think they nailed it in this game. A big theme in the earlier games was they nailed their music right on the head. So
yeah. Maybe in the teens I can point fingers at games that aren't that good when it comes to music. It feels kind of rushed, something like that. But 1 through 10, they were just hammering away these awesome soundtracks.
Yeah, they were great. Kevin Manthe did a great job with this case, like many others.
Yes, he did. So this brings us to Atmosphere.
Now, the atmosphere is what makes the game.
This could be my favorite game for Atmosphere. I think I might like this one more than Treasure in the Royal Tower. Maybe it's tied for Blackmore Manor, but important distinction is that almost the entire game takes place outside, which is uncommon for Nancy Drews. I mean, like...
Oh, come to think of it.
How many other games can you say that for?
Well,
Capu Cave?
A good part of it does take place in the Speakeasy Underground, but...
Maybe. But
Yeah.
there's the woods, there's the bird watching, there's just going back and forth all the time.
No, there is. Yeah, the bulk of the game is outside. I'll give you that, and that's something I never considered before. But this place.
Let's talk about the locations you can go to. Like, here's something that I want to make a distinction of. The last game, Scarlet Hand, felt very limited when it came to the environment. You had the museum, and albeit the museum had some cool locations that you unlock later on, like the second floor to the temple. Otherwise, you had just 4 crammed little offices you could visit, and there was nothing going on there but people to talk to. This game,
It felt huge.
it was rewarding because the further you explored, the more stuff you'd unlock, and the more you progressed in puzzles, the more areas became open. I remember how relieving it felt being like 10-year-old idiots finally figuring out how to fix the motorboat so we could go meet the other suspects. For the longest time,
finally.
we played this game thinking it was just a red knot. But oh my gosh. Let's talk about like the actual place. Sally's cabin's a real small place. You can't go upstairs, or you can't see it at least. That's just where Nancy goes to sleep, and you can set it to AM or PM.
That would have been a nice touch if you could go upstairs for something.
She's got a little shed, which we'll talk about when we get to the end game category, because there's some interesting stuff that happens there. There's a motorboard on her little dock that she can take to M's Emporium, which is a little general store that sells live bait and drinks and stuff like that. There's the Rangers Acres Station, which also doubles as like the museum and post office.
And then there is the woods.
The woods are
The
great.
woods, it's like we said earlier, it's very maze-like. You kind of have to memorize what each turn is in order to get to the very far back point of the woods, which is the cemetery.
And there's always bird calls playing. There's even a challenge where Nancy has to take pictures of different birds. We mentioned that earlier, but we'll get into how that challenge ends in the next segment. And otherwise, there's the cemetery, which is just a very chilling place. The grass there is all like pale.
It's gray.
Yeah, it's a very big tone shift from the rest of the woods. Some parts of it are like nice and green and lush, and then the cemetery just looks so dead. It's super spooky.
And then there's the speakeasy.
The actual tunnels leading up to the speakeasy just look like they're part of a mine shaft. They're so dark, and you need to move your lantern around the screen to see them all.
And then there is the secret passage within the secret passage
That leads into like a cave.
where the ghost dogs are being kept. This was a really cool point because it's where you don't find the culprit here, but you find
A lot of incriminating evidence, and it's in the end game. When you get to this cave, you're really near the culprit reveal.
right.
But I don't want to talk about that so much until the ending. So otherwise, there is a little like well. You get to the bottom of Nancy's well when you are in this place. I'm just not realizing that's what it was, where all the water was and the pipes that you turn and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then otherwise, for as far as locations go, to the right of the cabin, there's a little path that you can follow. It took us forever to find. That takes you to Red Knot's little treehouse observation platform, where you can talk to him at night, but he's nowhere to be seen during the day.
That's a good touch, yeah.
So now we're getting into the ending. This is a pretty good ending for a game too, if not a little ridiculous at times.
It's not my favorite ending. Final scene is the best ending, of course.
Final scene ending is better than this ending. Yeah, I have to admit that.
Okay, the ending. Something that we need to bring up in the ending, we kind of exempted it from the previous story, but it's the bird watching, and more specifically how it concludes with Nancy being knocked over the head and placed in a shed, hands tied, with the shed being on fire. This is probably one of the craziest sequences of events in any Nancy Drew game. It's definitely the most violent.
Yeah, we were very, very startled when this happened, because, 1 second you finally find the red-tailed hawk, and he perches on the house, and you take a picture of him, and Nancy realizes that he's, like, standing on a speaker, and just like, wait a minute. And then you get thumped over the head, and you're in a burning shed, and you get to see Nancy's hands and feet, and it's all so sudden.
Now, there's actually a pretty cool puzzle. It's a logic-based puzzle on how to escape the shed. Nancy has to... The end goal is to cut down a scythe, which spectacularly lands right between your arms, cutting the rope that's tying you so that you can escape.
It's kind of ridiculous.
Before you do anything else, you have to put out the fire in the shed, or else all of Moon Lake will be set ablaze, and there's a interesting game over sequence where a newspaper pops up saying that...
It's Ranger Stink, the little skunk.
Oh,
the
yeah,
mascot.
the mascot.
It says, hey kids, don't forget that after being knocked out, tied up, and thrown in a burning shed, to always put out the fire.
So, after Nancy puts out this fire, Red Knot, the only time you can see him during the daytime actually, sprints over to greet Nancy.
What in the blazes just happened here?
Yeah, he's got some cool lines. Jamie, you want to talk about the encounter?
Yeah, he's just rude to you. He's just goes, whoa, sounds like you're not making much sense when you tell him what happened. Probably smoke inhalation. And then there's like a bunch of off-screen encounters that happen. Apparently Ranger Akers comes by and says that he gave you a ticket for burning refuse because they think you set the fire on purpose.
Emily comes over and gives you tea, once again adding to the friendly suspect is always the culprit fuel.
Yeah, that's been the case for like, what, the past 4 games now?
Every game. I mean, except for Lewis and Message in a Haunted Mansion.
Oh, and Stay Tuned for Danger, but we didn't review that one.
Yeah.
He's always a jerk.
Now to the true end game, the discovery of Mickey Malone's gold deep down in the secret passageways.
Right, so there's a large sequence of secret passageways. In one of William Akers' journal entries, you find a map that he has folded up in there it's like a map of Moon Lake, and he's marked an eye for where Iggy would always sit on the porch, and everything else is charted out in squares, and it's captioned, "The dogs will lead the way." And basically what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to figure out every single dog's favorite roost where they would always like to hang out. And one of the dogs would go bark at a bird in a tree, the same tree where Nancy finds the Red Hawk finally. One of them would swim out in the lake to a little shipwreck of a ship called the Folly, I think, or something like that. And you're supposed to figure out which these tiles are supposed to be for each dog, and then you find a mosaic way down deep in the tunnels that's of this map, and you have to figure out which squares of each dog would be. You press all 4 of them, and it opens up to a like almost sewer place that's at the bottom of Nancy's well. And once you get down there, oh man, it's a pretty crazy sequence of events. You need to like carefully make sure you drain the well before opening the chamber into it, or else the whole place floods and Nancy drowns. That was a very scary game over sequence.
Yeah, very unexpected.
It really startled us when we played.
But then getting back to actually discovering the gold, you climb down a ladder, make the discovery of finding, what is it, like 600 pounds of gold bullion? Yeah.
And, wait, I want to say real quick, when you find the ghost dogs in that little foggy cavern, you find a lot of stuff that's really, really incriminating. There's toothpaste and like optical drops that make it so their eyes glow yellow. You find a journal with pink writing in like cursive that's just has a lot of incriminating stuff. Nancy Drew arrives at Moon Lake is written on the calendar. One of the reminders says, "Need to return Titanic to Blockbuster." So, yeah, that's maybe that is Red Knot. I don't know. Maybe it's Ranger Akers, or maybe it's Emily. But
spoiler alert, it's Emily.
Yeah. And so, if you want to take away the ending once you find that gold, like you were saying.
Yeah, you climb down a ladder, you find the 600 pounds of gold, and then Nancy makes her way to go back up the ladder, and then you get a cool cinematic. Nancy looks up the ladder to find Emily Griffin holding a huge bone.
It's like a femur.
It looks like a dinosaur bone. I mean, it's not something a dog would chew on. This thing is actually enormous.
Yeah.
But she's holding this big bone, using it as a melee weapon to intimidate us, and I do not like this in-game solution. I think it's pretty cheesy and illogical, but Nancy has to turn back from where she was to the gold room, and there is a drain on the bottom of the floor. Nancy somehow has the intuition to open this drain, climb into the drain, and then put the lid back on, climb through the pipe to where Emily was standing prior, open up and come out that way, and then lock Emily in the gold room. And that's just, it's illogical. I mean, I don't know, I didn't really like it. It was a very quick sequence of events, and
yeah, it's kind of just startling how fast everything happens.
Yeah.
But
Nancy locks her in the room. She climbs up the ladder and gets Jeff Akers from there on out.
Yep. And then the end game letter begins to read, and Nancy talks about how all is well. A whole bunch of press people drove out to Moon Lake and illegally parked, and that made Ranger Akers' day.
And Red Knot.
Oh, no, Red Knot gets super angry because Nancy's made such a ruckus, and now there's like news vans all over the place and police cars, so now he can't do his bird watching in peace.
Right.
It's a funny ending. I'm surprised Red Knot was like a goofy character. I'm surprised they never like brought him back, even if it's just like a reference somewhere. You know, he seemed like so suspicious for a lot of the time.
I know, he was a good suspect. He really was.
He might be like the best suspect of the first 7 games, as far as like
maybe
he's up there, probably top 3. But man,
Good game all in all. The ending gets a little cheesy, but
Now, I want to talk about, though, like, let's address the reasons why people don't like this game. Because I think that part of the reason why we really like it is nostalgia, and that's why a lot of people like it.
I think the big flaw people jump to instantly is, oh, there's 3 suspects.
Oh, that's a more narrowed down thing. I could pick anyone, it's a 33% chance of them being it, stuff like that.
And yeah, sure, but I think this is the perfect game for a low suspect pool because it kind of adds to the isolated factor of this cabin in the middle of the woods nowhere. It's like, you wouldn't expect, like, a lot of people to be around, right? I mean, Sally's obviously gone. Actually, you know, this game could have been pretty cool if Sally stuck around and was a character.
Yeah,
I don't know.
a bit, but that would
I
probably
don't want
mess
to
up
dive
some
into
story
that
implications.
possibility.
Here's something I can say about this. If I could choose any game to get a remaster, like how Secrets Can Kill did, this might be it. This and maybe 1 or 2 others, like Blackmore Manor and Contestant.
Oh, that'd definitely be cool. Another thing I think people get turned off by is the terrible find 6 birds, but you have to take a break in between that task to find the 12 critters, and there's a lot of tedious little chores in the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no instruction. There's a lack of instruction in the midpoint of the game on what to do.
Towards the end of Act 1, which I would say concludes with the bird challenge where you get knocked out and thrown in the burning shed, I'd say that towards the end of that act, there's just so much tedious busy work puzzles that feel like they're meant to help you explore, but by that time you've already explored everything. So, yeah, things start to get dry in that regard, and that's probably like the one part where if people can't beat that, they're not going to end up beating the game.
Yeah. All in all, it doesn't detract too much from the game's greatness, though, in my opinion.
So, you've already heard us just glorify this game nonstop. I just want to reiterate, the music and the atmosphere in this game are amazing. I've listened to playthroughs of this with no commentary so many times to go to bed, and just to study. Anything you want to add that I didn't say?
No, I think we covered it all pretty well.
All right, then.
Break down the tier system, let's give it a
tier
rating.
system again. So, S tier is the very best, and then A through F is, like it's a grading scale. A is really good. F is like Shattered Medallion. So, where would you put this game?
I'd give this game an A-, really.
A-. Okay, so these are our personal reviews of these games, right?
Right.
S tier.
You're giving it an S?
I think that this is one...
So this is a game without flaw to you?
No, there is some flaw, but this is our personal ranking of the tiers.
Right.
I would give it probably a 10 out of 10 in story, music, and atmosphere. And the puzzles is going to be like a 9. Suspects can get a little bit dry simply because there's not so much variety. But if you have any nostalgia for this franchise, this is like the #1 go-to game I recommend. I've had friends that are like stressed out about studying and stuff, and I just send them like no commentary playthroughs to this and tell them listen to it. I say, listen to it. It's like an audiobook, but with dialogue and a soundtrack. And some of them catch on to it.
Put it.
Yeah. It's, oh my gosh, it's like such a rabbit hole to just start listening to gameplay of this or start playing it, and it just feels like you're there in the actual lake itself. So yeah, I would put this in the S tier as one of the elite Nancy Drew games. Definitely recommend for a remaster. It excels 10 out of 10 in over half the categories.
Yeah, I love it too. Obviously not as much as you do, but it's a game that I will always look forward to playing, no matter how many times I've played it, frankly, so.
Okay. This concludes our review for Nancy Drew number 7, Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and let us know what your thoughts on the game are as well. Where do you rank it?
Yeah, I imagine that giving this an S tier is kind of controversial. I saw somebody who went as far as to put this in the F tier once.
Dang.
So, yeah, this sparks are gonna fly. Words are gonna be had. We recently did upload a nostalgic, no commentary long play of this game where we beat it all in one sitting. Some spoilers may have been used for that stupid wallpaper puzzle I can never figure out.
I think I got it, didn't we? I don't know.
One of us got it, but I feel like there were some spoilers involved. But anyhow, stay tuned for our review of the Haunted Carousel. That one should be interesting because that's probably the game 1 through 10 that I've played the least of. We recently did play through it too. But yeah, you'll probably have more to say on that one than I do.
Yeah, I've played that game a couple times. I know it inside and out.
Anyhow, thanks for sticking around, everybody. Hope you have a good day, and vote for Holt.
Vote for Holt.
Bye.